It's your tour guide around the SWAC QBs.
Wednesday and Sunday out when you can take the tour.
Hop on now, we starting out. Texas land, the Panthers shout. Tigers roar in deserts drought. What's that whisper? Ain't no doubt. Next to Book, got Jacks to see. More tigers prowling, making others flee. Arkansas, a quick short spree. Golden Lions, they run free.
Hop on the tour bus and let's go. Wednesday and Sunday out when you can take the tour.
We love the sip, so we raising cheers. Delta Devils fueling fears. Braves and Tigers through the years. Echo loud in crowded spheres. Swing through Bama, hear them call. Hornets buzzing, stand up tall. Bulldogs barking in the hall. Feel the rhythm, break or fall. Sunshine State, we ending last. Rattlers creeping, moving fast. Join the chorus, make it blast. Wildcats past and future, hold it fast. SWAC stories on the stage. Every chapter turning page.
What is going on, everybody? Happy Sunday. First Sunday of April. Man, we are in the midst of spring football. We've had spring games already these last couple of weeks, and we got a few more coming up. So I'm in the midst of doing my preseason thoughts and questions series, but today I wanted to take a little time and take a look at this has been something that I've done like the last couple of years, where I look at returning players, returning leaders from each team at different positions, and obviously the most not the most important position on the field per se, because to me, offensive and defensive lines are always the most important positions on the field, because you can't really have any success on either side of the ball without those guys in the trenches. But the position that everybody, whether they know football, whether they watch football, whether they just tangentially follow football, everybody keeps tabs on the quarterback. So I really wanted to kind of take a look at what's on the horizon for the SWAC in football at the quarterback position in terms of returning leaders. I will say these guys are not necessarily penciled in to be starters for their teams. Some of them might not even see any time, but I wanted to go over the guys who are returning, that are basically the returning leaders of their team at that position statistically. And just kind of take a look at where the state of the quarterback position is in the SWAC right now. I don't really think it's bad, but I don't really think it's great either. I think there may not be a lot of star power at the position, and so we're going to kind of take a look at that and see, and just kind of give our thoughts on that situation. So y'all make sure y'all hit those socials: Facebook at SWAC Talk, Twitter SWAC Talk 76, Instagram SWAC Talk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Like the video, comment, and share your thoughts on this topic as well. Who you think got next at the quarterback position for any team? Who you think will be the next breakout guy? Who you think may not be as good as some people think? But any of those things can pop off in the comments. Also, Tuesday we have a special live show with the homie JB from Sports Talking with JB. We're gonna talk Bama State football. He's gonna give his thoughts on the spring game that took place yesterday, and basically that's gonna be my Bama State thoughts and questions episode. So y'all make sure y'all check us out live Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Central, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Like I said, that's the homie JB from Sports Talking with JB. Y'all check his channel out. He do a lot of good stuff. He cover Bama sports. He cover Bama State. So y'all definitely keep tabs on him, man. He got a really good channel. So y'all go ahead and check him out and give him a subscription if you haven't done so already. And then, like I say, come back here on Tuesday and we're gonna chop it up about Bama State. It's been a minute since he's been on the show, so I'm glad to get him back rocking with us in this off season. So let's go ahead and take a look at this list of guys at the quarterback position. And so first and foremost, like I said, this is just for returning leaders for that particular team. If a guy transferred from somewhere else and he led his team, I'm not counting that. If a guy put up numbers that are better than the returning guy at that school that he transferred to, I'm not listing that. So this is just whoever is the returning leader of that particular team. Again, like I said, I'm not saying that this guy is going to be the starter or anything like that. I'm just looking at the guys who are coming back and kind of establishing a baseline of where these teams are statistically and what's ahead. So we'll start off with the Bulldogs of Alabama A&M, and they return Cornelius Brown, aka Quad Brown. He played in 11 games this season. He is a junior, transferred into Alabama A&M, I think, from UT Martin. He played in 11 games, had a few starts, split time with Xavier Langford last season. Had a solid season, I think, a season a lot of people may not even really realize. Kind of not really a spectacular season, but like I said, a solid season. He was the he was the statistical leader at Alabama A&M in 2024. He played 11 games, completed 127 passes on 222 attempts, threw for 1,616 yards, had 12 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Also carried the ball 49 times for 161 yards and 1 touchdown. So with a new coach in Sam Shade, I think that's a guy who is going to be considered a serious contender for that job. I would not hesitate to say he's probably the leader right now at that spot. And so with more reps, he could potentially be a guy, if that offense continues to flourish through the air, he could be a guy who could definitely take another step. He has some growing pains, has some up and down moments, but I think he has the potential to be a top quarterback in the league. He finished the season sixth in passing yards per game with 151.5. That's sixth in the conference. So he had a pretty solid season. Like I said, nothing spectacular, but just a solid overall season. And like I said, I expect to see a lot more out of him. He is one of the few guys who are returning statistical leaders from the 2024 season. There were 4 guys who actually were the statistical leaders of that passing attack in 2024, and those 4 guys will obviously be on this list. Brown is one. Another one is Kareem Key from Alabama State. He's listed as a redshirt freshman. I'm not quite sure on that, but because I know he played in 9 games last season, so he couldn't have redshirted last season. But I guess last season was the rest. I don't know. I think maybe he's a redshirt sophomore, but he could be. He's listed as a redshirt freshman, so we'll just go with that. He played in 9 games, mainly due to injury to the first 2 quarterbacks on the roster. Andrew Body, who was the starter, went down with injury in the first game. Also, Jonah O'Brien went down to injury in the same game, basically. Zach Sims came in and played some, was ineffective. Kareem Key, I think he was the 5th guy, I believe, took over and played the final 9 games of the season. He had a really solid stretch. He also had a stretch where, he showed his inexperience, but he finished 82 of 140 for 1,355 yards, had 11 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Had 45 carries for 55 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. He also led Bama State in passing this past season. Finished the season 7th in passing yards per game at 150.6 26.6 on the season. Also finished tied for tied for fifth in passing touchdowns. So really a solid season. And honestly, when you look at his numbers, he finished with numbers comparable to Miles Crowley, who was the preseason offensive player of the year at Grambling, also former Bama State quarterback. Obviously, he had some injuries late in the season, and never really hit his stride. But for a guy who came in and was basically a receiver and moved back to quarterback, he was a quarterback in high school, moved to receiver at Bama State, had to move to that spot in an emergency. I thought he had a pretty solid season. I mean, he did really almost everything that you could ask for him. He actually led the league in passing efficiency with a 160.1 rating. So very good season. Like I said, not spectacular. He did have a couple big games in there, but just really, kind of was up and down at times. But I think he did a solid job for what he was thrust into. This is a kid who probably had no idea he was going to play at all last season. So, when you take that into account, this is a really good thing, and it really makes Bama State have a passing offense that can really be solid. I mean, now you have this guy who played in 9 games and was solid, had his ups and downs, but he was solid. And then you return Andrew Body, who is coming off an injury. Can he regain form? This makes a very interesting battle going into the fall. And like I said, we'll talk about a lot of this on Tuesday with JB, so I'm not going to go too deep into it here. But like I said, I think that gives you a couple options at quarterback, and I think he definitely earned his stake to the claim. And a guy that's young like that, he's only going to get better if he continues to get reps. He actually had the second and third highest single game passing performances this season. He threw for 331 against Tuskegee in his final game of the season, and he threw for 326 against Valley. So he did have 2 really great passing games. He also had a 280-yard game against Grambling. So he had 3 really good performances through the air. That he really could kind of hang his hat on. So I think that's really a really solid situation. He also threw 4 touchdowns in both of those games, which were the second highest single game touchdown mark for any quarterback in the league. So I thought he had a really good season for what he did, and the position that he was thrust into. I think that you can't ask for much more than that from that guy. So I think he is if he continues to get the opportunities and the reps, I think he's a guy who could be a star, a potential star, in the future if he continues to grow and gets the opportunity to develop. Now, if he can't wrestle away the job and he kind of, has to sit, he may leave. You know how it goes right now in the portal. So I look forward to seeing, if he has opportunity to grow. But he's definitely a guy who I think you have to kind of, put a little respect on his name and understand that he has the potential, if he continues to develop, to be a guy who could fit that star power mold that I'm kind of looking for at the quarterback position, because we haven't really had a lot of guys in the league, overall in the last couple of years that could fit that mold. So I think, if he continues to develop and he gets the chance, he could be that, because he really showed flashes this past season. Now, Alcorn, I did some digging, and so I think I'm right on this. But if this guy isn't there anymore, then y'all let me know. And that kind of goes into one of the things I want to kind of say when it comes to spring, doing this kind of stuff during the spring. You got to kind of do a little bit of the legwork yourself, because there's not a lot of teams have 2025 spring rosters up. There's not a lot of write-ups and stuff on spring practice, so you kind of have to kind of search and see, search guys' social medias and see if they're still on the roster, see if they transferred or anything like that. But as far as I can gather, Trey Lawrence, who's a senior at Alcorn, he He played in 6 games this past season. He was 25 of 47 for 256 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Kind of was pressed into service later in the season when Xavier Vaughn went down um, to injury in portions of games. He also had 3 interceptions on the season to go to his 2 touchdowns. He had 12 carries for 12 yards and no touchdowns. So with Alcorn having that position basically being open, I think this is a guy who, again, showed some flashes here and there, over the course of his career at Alcorn. Never really had the opportunity to really fully flourish, so to speak, because he's been a backup, pretty much all the time. The potential is there, but he does have those mistakes that he makes in games, which comes from a guy that hasn't had a lot of experience. I'm not 100% sure on the state of Alcorn's quarterback battle, so I'm not gonna really forecast him as being the guy or even not being the guy. I think you got to kind of wait that out and see. Once I get a little bit of better of a hold of um, what they have in store for that team. So as far as being a guy with the potential, if he gets the chance, I think he can. He can produce with some more reps. I mean, obviously, being a guy who's been around a while, how much can he develop? Over the span of one season in terms of this 2025 season. How much could he develop? That remains to be seen. So being a guy that maybe gets the chance late in his career, I think you're not going to really see um, a huge breakout in terms of potential, but he could have a good season if the offense flows and he operates it. Otherwise, maybe somebody else takes the reins. But as far as I'm going with this right now, I think he's, like I said, he showed flashes, but he's also had some up and down moments. But you give him opportunity, maybe he takes the reins. The next guy that we have returning, who to me didn't really get a lot of attention from most people, primarily because the team he played for did not finish with a good record, and that's Cam Ransom. He actually is the leading returning passer in terms of yards per game in the conference. He finished last season with 164 completions, 262 attempts. He had 5 interceptions on the season. He threw 11 touchdowns, completed 62% of his passes, had 1,843 yards through the air, averaged 167.5 yards per game, and finished with an efficiency rating of 131.7, which was the fifth highest mark in the conference, third highest fourth highest in terms of returning guys. Every time I looked up, it was another guy returning in that mark, but he had the fourth highest pass efficiency rating of returning guys, and he really had a solid season at Bethune-Cookman. Also had a good season with his legs. Finished with 106 carries. He had 163 yards and 5 touchdowns. Wasn't necessarily a huge threat to run the ball in terms of yardage, but he was a guy who was tougher to bring down. And early in the season, he had some strong running performances. He finished. He had a season high 242 yards in a 5 overtime loss to Southern. That was one of his better games. He also threw for 219 against Texas Southern. So he had his opportunities to kind of make some things happen. He threw for I'm trying to say, his season high in touchdowns was 2. He threw for 2 against Grambling and 2 against Southern. Also had 2 against Texas Southern. So he had a really solid stretch in the month of November, where he really had a pretty solid month there. 3 straight weeks of two touchdown passes and 3 games with over 200 yards passing. So I think he kind of put some things together as the season went on, and Bethune-Cookman got a little bit better offensively later in the season. Still not anything spectacular. They didn't wow you, and obviously they didn't pick up very many wins in that stretch. But I think he kind of showed some flashes there, and he is a redshirt senior, so he's going into his final year, and he should be the full-time starter. Last season he kind of alternated with guys, and at a certain point, he kind of took the reins. So right now, he is one of the top guys returning in the conference. He does have a potential to be an all-conference preseason guy. I would probably slate him as second team all-conference in the preseason. Um, because I think I think out of the guys that have returned and played a lot, he does have the better overall numbers in terms of some of the averages. But obviously, the guy who would be first team to me is unanimous, and we'll get to him in a second. But I do think that Cam Ransom has an opportunity to get even more productive and even more efficient as he gets more consistent reps and is viewed as the guy. Now, how much this offense improves, that's always going to be a year-to-year thing for Bethune-Cookman because they have such turnover on this team on both sides of the ball, and again they're coming off of a losing season, so how much improvement can be there is going to always be up to remain to be seen. Next up is FAMU, and they obviously have opening at quarterback, losing Daniel Richardson. Junior Maritovic is the guy who is the leading returning guy. He was in a battle for that starting spot last season. Didn't necessarily have a great season in the opportunities that he got. Came in reserve against Prairie View when Richardson went down. Didn't necessarily have a great game. Rattlers lost that game. He finished the season playing in 4 games. He was 21 of 45 on the season, 189 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions. He had 5 carries for 3 yards and no touchdowns. Again, he is a redshirt junior. And I know they have a few guys battling it out for that spot, and I'm not forecasting anybody as a starter if they weren't already a starter. But this is a guy who kind of has been the next in line for the last couple of years, and he hasn't really had a lot of opportunities for great performances. So, that makes that job still be open to me. And so, he again has had, his moments here where he made a play or two here and there, but he's also had those moments that, you look at it and say, I don't know if this guy is the guy for the job, but he does, he's going to battle it out for the position again, and we'll see how he does. But there is a void at that spot in terms of production. When you lose the player of the year and the first team all conference quarterback, you're going to have that hole. That's for anybody. I don't care what you got behind that guy. When you lose a guy like that, somebody's going to have to step into that role. So we'll see if he is the guy this year to do it. Next up is Grambling. Again, they lost their top 2 quarterbacks. Miles Crawley finished his eligibility, and Del J. Bailey went to junior college. So that left Ashton Fry as the leading returning guy. Again, they brought in Xavier T-Set from Southern, who had a couple big games at Southern, but I'm only looking at this in terms of guys who played at Grambling last season. So Fry didn't really put up a lot of numbers, only played in 3 games. He had 4 completions, 7 attempts, had 9 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Had 7 carries for minus 21 yards and no touchdowns. So, that leaves a big opening for guys to come in. And I know they have about 4 or 5 guys battling it out for the job. Coach Joseph said he's in no hurry to name a starter. So, I think going into the fall, all these guys are going to battle it out. I don't know where Fry ranks on the pecking order, but he had a few appearances here and there at Grambling, nothing major. So, he doesn't really have a lot of experience there. And so that leaves a really big opening for anybody to take that reign. Maybe he takes that step between now and the fall. Maybe he has a big summer in the leadership role and showing that he's doing a lot of the things off the field that you want from a quarterback to take that spot. So we'll see. Like I said, this is probably the team with the least production returning at that position. And just because there wasn't really a lot of numbers there for their top returning guy. Next up is the guy who I would say right now is the best quarterback in the league, and I know he's had his detractors. I know some people have been, kind of hard on him from time to time. Um, but when he's on. And that's Jacoby and Morgan from Jackson State, second team all conference guy. Should be first team all conference in the preseason. Most likely he'll be the offensive player of the year in the preseason. Um, Had a really good season. Did he have his ups and downs? Yes. Did he have a couple games where he may not have looked sharp? Yes. Did he get pulled in the SWAC championship game? Yes, but he had a hell of a celebration bowl, and he also had some big games throughout the season. So, it is his job. He is the guy. He's a senior. Like I said, he's probably one of the few guys who I would say is at least on a star level in the conference at the position. He's probably the only guy who I would say is unequivocally that in that spot in this league. There's a few guys with the potential, but he's probably the top guy returning in the conference, hands down. I mean, when you look at his numbers, 163 completions, 256 attempts, 2,236 yards. He had 21 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Also carried the ball 98 times for 321 yards and 6 touchdowns. Just a guy who, had a really, really great season. When you look at, he is the leading passer in terms of actual yardage through the air. He's the leading quarterback returning in the conference in terms of touchdowns. He averages 157 yards per game through the air. 159 yards per game through the air, which makes him the second leading quarterback in that position. He averages 150. He had 157.9 efficiency rating on the season, which puts him second. So pretty much any measure that you use for him for quarterbacks, he is the top guy there. He's second in completions with 163. He is fifth. He is the second leading returning quarterback in terms of attempts. So, like I said, he is the guy. All the quarterbacks on the list, I mean, it's easy to put him in that spot. He has the experience. He has a championship under his belt in the conference. He has a division championship under his belt. He has a celebration bowl under his belt. So, that when you say, a guy who should be a star QB in the league, that's this guy. I mean, he is right. At least, returning, he is head and shoulders above everybody else right now. So, that's an easy spot there. Next up is Valley. They lost Tajarian Williams. I think he ended up at Murray State. Also, Jaden Sisk. I think he went to JUCO. And that leaves Ruben Lee. He's a senior. He played in 3 games. He had 18 completions, 34 attempts, 239 yards, had 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. He also carried the ball 9 times for 4 yards, no touchdowns. I think he played a bit early in the season here and there, but nothing major. And they have a new coach, so I'm quite sure that job is wide open. I mean, I don't think anything's established at Valley in terms of a pecking order. I know Coach Buckley said that it's mainly just looking and evaluating right now for his guys. So I wouldn't expect anything from Valley until you get closer to the season. Who trots out on the field to start the game against Southern on August 30th? Who knows? Will that guy be the guy to finish the season at that spot? Who knows? So like I said, as we get closer to the season, we'll get a bit better of a handle. But again, this is a guy who has limited experience in the season, and so we'll see how that goes. Next up is Prairie View, and they are in a position where they return a couple quarterbacks who played some, but including the guy who was the opening game starter, but he went down with injury, and that's Lucas Coley. He went down with injury, so obviously he didn't really put up a lot of numbers. Cam Peters, he's a senior. He is the leading returning guy. He played in 8 games, had 68 completions, 132 attempts, 925 yards, had 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Also carried the ball 43 times for 63 yards. Again, new head coach. So we'll see. We'll see who comes out of the spring and into the summer. And most likely, who I think this probably be another battle that last for a minute. I haven't seen anything definitive in terms of naming a guy right now. So, maybe they're gonna, continue to evaluate and see how things go. But he does have some solid games under his belt. He did have a couple of rocky games in there where he got pulled, but he didn't really play a lot until he was a guy who transferred into PV. So he was looking for opportunity, and he had his ups and downs. And we'll see if he continues to grow if he gets the spot. Um, he does have the potential to be a guy that can be a good quarterback in the league if he gets the reps. But you can't count out Coley as well. So like I said, this is not a show about naming a starter, so I'm not gonna really go into battles like that. But he is the top returning guy for PV in terms of statistics. Um, and so we'll see how that goes with him. Um, he did finish the season um, number 12 in the conference in passing yards per game at 115.6. He also finished 10th in the league in passing efficiency with 114.3 rating. So he didn't necessarily have a spectacular year because he didn't really get as much action, but he did qualify to rank in the top half of in the top group of the quarterbacks in terms of those two stats. So he did have some production. He did have some good moments. And so we'll see how he does. Next up is Southern, and they have a guy who also didn't really play a lot last season. Got more action as the season went on. Late ended up starting the last two games of the regular season, and basically played in the last three games of the regular season. Um, and that's Jalen Woods, who is basically named the starter at Southern. So this is one of those situations where even though this guy didn't really play a lot, he does have the most experience on the roster at Southern. So he's gonna go into he kind of came into the spring as the top guy. He's gonna leave as the top guy unless something crazy happens. But he played in 6 games. He's a redshirt sophomore. He was 38 of 66 with 541 yards, had 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I also carried the ball 19 times with no yards, mainly due to sacks, lost of yardage due to sacks and no touchdowns. So definitely a guy who if he continues to get those opportunities, he's taking some of those steps off the field that you want from your quarterback. If he continues to get better, he could be a breakout guy. And then, next season, if he has a good season this season, next season, he could be one of those guys that's looked at as a potential top guy at the QB spot. But we'll see how he handles being the guy coming out of the spring and into the summer and the fall. Next up is Texas Southern. They lost a couple quarterbacks there. Jordan Davis, he's a redshirt sophomore. He played in 5 games. He was 36 of 62 for 379 yards and 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Finished with 52 carries for 135 yards and 1 touchdown. TSU offensively was not spectacular. They were a team who really wanted to run the ball a lot, and they didn't necessarily pass the ball that well last season. So you wasn't going to get a tremendous passing attack from anybody who returned. I mean, the team only averaged 117 yards per game through the air last season as a whole. They only threw 8 touchdowns as a team. So they just, that there wasn't a lot to take from them offensively. So there's not much that you can kind of hang your hat on there. But there's another guy who had some solid moments here and there, had some some head scratches here and there. He was a guy who kind of flourished more with his legs, primarily because his team was a primary running team. Didn't necessarily have the opportunities to put up solid numbers through the air when he was out there. He didn't really have a lot of experience, so he was kind of winging it. Even with a coach that was new and a staff that was new and a system that was new, so not a lot was set up there for him to have a huge amount of success. And because he didn't really play much after a certain point in the season. So he got some things done here and there. It'd be interesting to see how that situation plays out. Um, Not the biggest guy in the world, but he was a guy who kind of who could kind of be dangerous if he got loose. So we'll see how he does. And finally, UAPB, they lose Makai Higgins, who was basically statistically one of the top quarterbacks in the league. I know this isn't about that guy, but he put up really good numbers last season at Pine Bluff. So he left a huge hole that would need to be filled. He left a 2,541 yard hole passing. He threw for 16 touchdowns. He averaged 211 yards per game. He did have 130.9 pass efficiency rating, 175 attempts, 175 completions, 328 attempts. So he leaves a huge hole. And DJ Stevenson is the guy that was the primary backup. He played in 4 games. He's a senior. He was 9 of 17 last season for 93 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He carried the ball 11 times for 19 yards and a touchdown. So he got some action here and there. Again, like a lot of these guys, not a lot of reps in game. So you never really going to get a full idea of who a guy is when he plays in 4 games and has 17 pass attempts and 11 carries. So basically 18 touches. Basically 28 touches. So you're not really going to get a great idea of who this guy is. So obviously that leaves another spot that's open. We'll see how if he kind of steps up as the leader. I know he was kind of in a battle neck and neck early in the spring and summer last season. So we'll see if he can continue to kind of take those steps. Again, he's a senior, so how much of a step a guy is going to take that late in his career. It always remains to be seen. I mean, you do have some guys who in their last year, they take a big step and they have a great season. And there's some guys, they play their last year and, because they didn't have a lot of reps, they're up and down throughout their time. And, also playing on a team that's, not really good right now is also going to be a factor into what kind of production you get from this guy. So, again, when you kind of look at this overall, only 4 guys who led their teams in the statistical categories last season return. All 3 of those guys did have, all 4 of those guys did have pretty solid seasons. Yeah, 1 all SWAC guy returning. So that leaves 8 teams with, different levels of uncertainty at the quarterback spot in terms of, who that guy is and, can he take that next step? Out of that remaining 8, I would say Southern is probably the only one with an established starter in that group. So that leaves 7 other teams. And I think in the case of like Grambling, I'm not even sure, if Ashton Fry is even, even considered to be the front runner in that spot. Of course, like a couple of those guys, they may not be as well, but Grambling is the only team who really had limited production returning. So that to me leaves that spot totally wide open. And of course, I'm always be for my boy T-Set, so maybe he can kind of take the reins there. But that'll be another show that we do. But I just wanted to kind of take a look at the state of SWAC quarterbacks right now. It's not, in terms of returning production, is not super pretty, but there is light on the horizon. I still don't think there's a lot of star power at the position, but there are some capable guys, and there are some guys who I think could become stars if they continue to get those opportunities. There's a couple guys I see who could be breakout guys. So there is some potential there, and there is some room for growth. But a lot of these guys are older guys, so there's not a lot. There is not a lot of room for growth for from some of those guys. When you look at this list, you have like 6 guys on this list who are seniors, are redshirt seniors. Um, you also have you also have 3 juniors on the list, so that's 9 guys right there. And the other 3 other guys are basically sophomores. So there's not there's a lot of guys who have been in college a long time. These guys may not have been on these teams that long because some of these guys are transfers. So there's a lot of room for growth and fluctuation for a lot of these rosters. So we'll see who takes the step. I would say preseason all conference quarterbacks will be Jacoby and Morgan first team, and I say Cam Ransom as second team. Um, and from there on, we'll see what happens. But I just wanted to, kind of get my thoughts on the state of SWAC quarterbacks right now, and we'll see what happens from here. So with that being said, man, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC Seawells, signing out, and I will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.